So what came out first? And we'll go through the list. But what was the first on the list?
Oh, the top job this year, or the top job on the 2025 list, is actually a veterinarian. And I personally love that this job is top. And, there's some really strong numbers behind it. This particular role has grown 124% over the past 3 years.
Wow.
And I know we said kind of 75,000 is this minimum salary,
Right.
but it is a healthcare role, and you can make up to, or kind of an average of $140,000 as a veterinarian. So, in terms of what it can offer you, financially, of course, it's a great role, but it's also one of those roles that people are kind of drawn to,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
People love their pets,
People love their
and
pets.
they're
AI is not
spending money
taking it
on
over. Oh yeah.
them.
Oh, 100, they're like kids. 100%. Before you have kids, usually they're your kids. They're your children. And then you have kids, and it's like, okay, well, you're not quite our children. You're still loved, of course, but um, hey, it's William Tincup. Hopefully, you are listening and watching the You Should Know podcast. We've got Jen on from Indeed, and we're going to talk about her most recent or their most recent jobs report. Jen, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
The pre-show was awesome. You're a Texas girl, South Texas. You're in Austin. Who hates Austin? There's no one. I can't hate it. It's just other than traffic. It's a funny bit because this is probably more pre-COVID than not, but people would tell me, man, I love Texas. That's okay. Wait a minute. Where did you go? I said, oh, Austin. I'm like, yeah, that's not a part of Texas.
It's
Sorry.
its own little kind of unique place, but
It, it,
fantastic city.
it is a fantastic city. It's just like if you go to Houston, if you go to Laredo or El Paso or Dallas or Fort, it's not like that.
Totally different. Each place has its own culture.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Laredo actually when I was a kid. Different culture, different bit, you know. So, first of all, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, pleasure to be here. Like I said, my name is Jen Harity, and I am a career expert and a senior program manager here at Indeed. So, really, what I do is I focus on creating job seeker resources in the form of video, really, for Indeed's YouTube channel. It's really great to be able to, work for a company that's so mission driven and, that aligns with my own mission. Been in career services for over 15 years now and working with
Wow.
Indeed for the past 7. So, yeah, it's just been really great. And we create a lot of great resources for them.
What's the YouTube? Is it just / Indeed, or what's the YouTube
Correct.
channel
Yep.
for? Wow. So tell me, we'll stay there for just a second. What have you seen change in career services? Like again, I can kind of date myself and go backwards, but I'd like to actually hear it from you. In the 15 years ish that you've been doing it, what's been the biggest change?
I think the biggest change has really been the introduction of applicant tracking systems and just how prevalent they've become.
Right.
I know you said you might date yourself. I'll definitely date myself. When I first got into recruiting as an intern, we were using paper applications. I worked for a company and,
Yep.
was one of the first people to use and integrate an applicant tracking system at the time. And so it's just, it's been a very different landscape in that sense. So when we give a lot of advice, people hear about, well, you've got to watch out for ATS and you've got to focus on skills and keywords. It
Right.
really is such an important tip and advice because they are so prevalent now.
And job seekers, let's say millennials versus Gen Z, what are they looking for these days?
What we've seen working with Gen Z, there really is this focus on, I think it's like the individual, right?
Yeah.
They're very focused on finding companies that align with their values that are going to give them that work life balance because they really see work kind of fitting into their life in a very holistic way.
Right.
It's not a live to work
Right.
mentality. It
Right.
very much is work to live. And so it's just amazing how roles and society has really changed, and there's actually a lot of opportunities out there that allow for this type of work-life balance that Gen Z is seeking.
It's
And
interesting
we're all
because
seeking it, really.
I watched the comic last night on YouTube, Ari Shafir, and he was talking about how they've learned from their parents. And like, I don't want to do that. Whatever that was, yeah, I don't want to do that. And so it's a reaction of, to some degree, against millennials or against Gen Z,
Mhm.
of like, yeah, I don't want to, I want work to fit around my life. Life comes first.
I think
Happiness,
that learning
whatever.
is so crucial, though, right? It's
I
kind of,
know. I'm jealous, actually.
I'm jealous, and I highly respect it.
Me too.
Just the ability to kind of set these boundaries for ourselves to say, actually, I'm looking for a job and a role and a career that really meets my needs.
Yeah.
Um,
It is
you know,
so different than when I first came out and was in the job market. Well, like if it was a bad boss, okay, well, it's just a bad boss. Like, you just gotta like get on with it. Like, I didn't know any better. No one told me any better. So it's
right,
just like,
right,
oh, I just got dealt with a bad boss or bad jobs. Like, all right, well, do this for a while and just like, now I love, and again, I'm inspired, a little bit jealous of Gen Z, not as much as millennials as I am Gen Z because they operate different. I mean, both my boys are Gen Z, and I can tell you from a parenting perspective, completely different. Like it's not even
I you know,
close.
I agree. My oldest daughter is Gen Z,
Oh yeah,
and so being able to watch her and coach her through her own job search is just really interesting. And her and her friends, it's
yeah,
this whole group, and um, you know, just I have a lot of respect for them. I think
yeah.
they do a lot of things, really, really well, and
Yep.
again, just kind of having that frame of mind of like I'm going to find something that works for me, and
Yeah,
if I'm in a bad workplace, that's okay. I'll find something else, right?
employers have to be hip to that and see the change and be accepting and go, you know what? It's not like how I did it or even how the other generation did it. It's new. And you know what? If I want that talent, I've got to actually recruit differently. I've got to talk differently. I've got to sense out their needs and desires and passions and skills and all that stuff. And like, for me, it's just different discourse altogether because they're not
Mhm.
necessarily like millennials. I remember one of the big things for millennials when they first entered into the market was what's next. It was more of a, yeah, this is cool. I'll do that. I'll be successful, whatever. But like, what's after that? And so the
Mhm.
emphasis for a corporation was more of you've got to have a line of sight of internal mobility or mobility
Right.
in general. But with Gen Z, I don't see that as much. I don't see that what's next kind of thing. Like I liked it because it was like, well, hey, at least they're thinking about what's next. I had no idea. I just went from one thing to the other kind of
Yeah,
haphazardly.
they're kind of making their own career path in that
Yeah.
sense, right? They're not leaving it up to the employers, but it's really interesting to see how employers are positively reacting to Gen Z
Yes.
because you do
Yeah.
see more flexibility with job roles now. I know there's been, a lot of talk about return to office policies, but, the reality is there are still a large number of companies that do offer that flexibility
Right.
because they see that this is what people are looking for. They want the ability to work remotely or have this hybrid type of role. And it's really interesting because when we think about the best jobs list,
Hmm.
that flexibility is one of the criteria that we looked at, and it is something that employers are incorporating into their role descriptions.
If you want that talent, then you adhere to kind of what they want. If you don't, that's cool. Like I think a lot of the RTO stuff is really a passive way to do terminations or RIFs. Because we're just going to force you back to work. You live in Japan, like you're not coming back to the office. Like you'll just quit.
There may be no office near you to go to.
I'm not even sure these people actually know that there's an office or cubes or like electricity or anything like that. I think it's just a way to not do a fire, not do a riff, not do a firing, not to get in the news in that way.
Yeah.
Just go, hey, we want to culturally, we want to get everybody together, bond, this, that, and the other. And again, that's great if your workforce wants that.
Hmm.
Like fresh out of college, I remember the desire to actually go to an office and go out and go to ball games and go to, have dinner and drinks and like all that stuff was actually fun. But at a
Well,
certain point
and
in your
you're not far
career,
off. Yeah, Gen Z, it's a lot of the same. I know we did some a recent research, and Gen Z actually really is open to return to office
isn't that
because
crazy?
they graduated during the pandemic, or a
That's
portion
right.
of them did. And so that's an experience that they've never had. And so, what they really see it is this opportunity to build a community,
Yeah.
right? To have that network because it's something that they weren't necessarily privy to. So it is really interesting to see how they're reacting to some of these changes within the workforce.
So let's talk a little bit about more about the report. So take
Yeah.
the audience into kind of what was the goals, what did you really want to learn, and what did you learn with the report?
Sure. So when we think about the best jobs in the US for 2025 and really what the goal was, it really was to help all people get jobs based on the factors that they have said are important to them. So we're
Right.
looking at three key criteria, high salary, opportunity, and flexibility. So when we break that down, opportunity really looks at growth in postings. And so we looked at a specific time frame. We looked at growth in the share of postings on Indeed from 2020 to 2023. For salary, we were looking at a minimum salary of at least $75,000 annually. And
Right.
when you think about $75,000, this has kind of been a number where a lot of people have stated, this is kind of where we say this is might be considered middle class. It's a
Right.
good salary, right?
Right.
It's a salary
Right.
that's going to provide you comfortability. And then with flexibility, this is where we see work life balance. And we see that flexibility in terms of roles that have an indication that they might be remote or have a hybrid component. And so, really, this list is to help job seekers, one, discover new opportunities and kind of see what some potential, either new career paths could potentially be, especially when we're in such a competitive job market.
So what came out first? And we'll go through the list, but what was the first on the list?
Oh, the top job this year, or the top job on the 2025 list, is actually a veterinarian. And I personally love that this job is top. And, there's some really strong numbers behind it. This particular role has grown 124% over the past 3 years.
Wow.
And I know we said kind of 75,000 is this minimum salary,
Right.
but it is a healthcare role, and you can make up to, or kind of an average of $140,000 as a veterinarian. So, in terms of what it can offer you, financially, of course, it's a great role, but it's also one of those roles that people are kind of drawn to,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
People love their pets,
People love their
and
pets.
they're
AI is not
spending money
taking it
on them.
over. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, honey, they're like kids, 100%. Before you have kids, usually they're your kids, they're your children. And then you have kids, and it's like, okay, well, you're not quite our children. You're still loved, of course, but it's when I looked at that list and I saw veterinarian at the top of it, the first thing I thought of is AI is not going to take over veterinarians. Yeah, immediately. Maybe in a decade, fair, whatever. I'm not going to deal with flying cars, but it's not something that you immediately have to worry about if you have a passion for pets. There is there's some schooling involved. There's definitely Texas A&M has actually a really great veterinarian program, and it's like one of those deals. You go to school, you get your degrees, you get out, you work for somebody else, and maybe you set up your own shop. I've seen an uptick in rural veterinarians where they're
Mhm.
more traveling. They don't have an office per se. They have everything that they need, and they go to where the issue is. Those people make killer money too because they don't have the overhead of an office. But
Right, right.
so I love that. I mean, personally, I love that because it's not what most people would have thought, like, okay, yeah, data scientists and AI this and AI that. Like, I like that it was something normal. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it is really interesting, when we think about what are the trends that we see, or, for me, what are some of the things that stood out. As I mentioned, I have a background in career services and career coaching. My actual certification has a specialization in tech. And
Oh,
so
cool.
for a few years, I worked very closely with technical job seekers like software engineers, or, those that are in DevOps or
Yep.
IT. And, when I was working in that space, in 2017 to 2020, you talk about opportunities galore for
Oh,
these
yeah.
roles.
Not
And
easy. And the money was flowing. It was crazy money.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so when we look at, what was, relatively not that long ago,
Right.
to where we are now and the roles that are reflected in this list, there's an absence of them,
That's right.
and, it's something that we've seen over the last couple of years where these tech roles aren't as prevalent. But what you will see is that there is still this
Oh, yeah.
technical expertise that is needed.
100%.
Within the roles on these lists, we're seeing those specializations. So I think that's something that's really interesting.
Yeah, software runs the world. So, I mean, at one point, you still have to, even though Gen AI and all these other things are there, you still gotta, someone's gotta actually do it. Whether or not you code in ChatGPT or it's still gotta get done. Someone's got to do it. Someone's got to architect it. Someone's got to make sure it gets done, make sure it's right, like, all that stuff. So, like, that's not going away. Tech jobs,
Right. And
fear
a lot of
not.
roles are, there are going to be roles that are impacted. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
just about, when we look at the research there and we look at the jobs that are posted on Indeed, just about every job has skills that would be impacted by AI, but
Right.
that doesn't necessarily mean that AI will replace those roles.
Right.
AI is going to bring new role opportunities.
100%.
Ideally, for someone that is in a role that, AI could be impacting, really finding those opportunities to leverage it and to help it, use it to find efficiencies in your role so that you can really focus on the key aspects that AI cannot do.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because, you mentioned the veterinarian role. There will absolutely be impacts where within the technology,
Oh,
let's say, that a
100%.
veterinarian uses,
Oh,
but
yeah.
still hands on very much in the sense of, doing these exams. The AI in that sense is a tool that helps them, but the human skills are still needed.
Still needed, still required. And again, you're right. You can see kind of technology that will go around veterinarians, software, but also, bots, conversational bots and things like that. It's like, hey, listen, I've got a rabbit, it's got this. And you can see a veterinarian actually either voice or texting interacting with a bot that basically says, okay, yeah, here's the things we need to triage. Like, you can see that already. Like, okay, if that's not already done, some company hasn't already started down that path. Well, it will happen. But the act of delivering a calf, if you've ever seen or delivering a horse or something like that, that's not going to change. They still need to
Right.
do that
You
bit.
still need the human.
Turns out, you still need that bit. All right. What was the next couple things on the list?
Yeah, so kind of after that, we see, sales representative is number two, followed by physician. When we look at the top 25 roles, there really are industries that stand out.
Right.
Healthcare has a big presence, like I said, with veterinarian, physician. We also have like clinical psychologist, and like a director of clinical services on that list. But then, of course, there's like these tech and engineering roles. There's like 8 different engineering roles represented in the top 25.
Wow.
And what's really interesting about those is, um, again, we're not talking about software engineering roles. We're
Right.
talking about a water resource engineer or a structural engineer.
Yep.
These are kind of like societal foundational roles,
Oh, yeah.
right? That really
Oh,
speak
yeah.
to infrastructure needs.
Civil engineering's never going to go out of style. Somebody's got to plan the roads. Someone's got to do that bridge, build the bridges, and do all that bit.
Absolutely.
Again, software. and AI and all that stuff. Great. It's going to help those people doing those jobs. Like we all check, got it. I did have a question on the sales position though,
Yeah.
because I think it was sales in general, but do you think of like technical sales or enterprise sales? Do you see that as more, or is it more on I'd say more blue collar type sales?
Yeah, so we didn't drill down into the specifics because,
Right,
agreed, sales representative is such a broad term, and
right.
there are so many different industries that that utilize sales representatives. I think the one kind of industry specific sales role that's on the list is the advertising sales representative,
Oh,
and so
really?
what's really, I think, really nice about seeing the representation of these sales roles like sales rep, territory manager, and advertising sales representatives is these are not necessarily aspirational roles in the sense that you don't necessarily need a college education
Right.
or a college degree to be successful and earn a great salary in these positions. Because when you look at the list, of course, if you're using this list for your job search, people can't just transition into a veterinarian role,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
They're not just gonna, pivot to become a physician.
Right.
There's a lot of education and training behind it, and that does take time. And so when you look at the kind of benefit of having this representation of different types of roles and the different types of, I think, educational requirements needed to be successful. It is really great to see that there's opportunity out there for everyone. It's really about using this list as kind of a guiding post for you to say, let me look into it. Like, it looks like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
video, this role, will pay really well. It looks like there's a lot of flexibility. Let me dig into it and see if it might be something that I'm interested in, and whether or not I have kind of the means
Right.
to invest in pursuing that as a career.
It's funny, no one in high school or college thinks about, generally speaking, I say no one, very few people think of sales as a profession. Unless someone in their family did it or something like that, that's different. But like if you've never been exposed to sales in high school or college, and all of a sudden it's like you get exposed to this world. I've seen companies in my career that they like young talent that has no background because they'll teach them the format, the bit. They'll teach them all the things that they need to do, their method, if you will. And then
Hmm.
I've seen companies that are like, we want for this type of sale, we want people that have been in this particular industry for 10, 15 years because, it's an 18-month sale. And we need people that can kind of weather that storm and stay with the prospect and things like that. So the question I had, especially, well, we'll deal with sales first. What are because you deal with the employee, not prospects, the candidate side
Hmm.
as well. What do they need to see in a job description or job ad? Like, what do they need to see that'll actually get them to go, yeah,
When I work with job seekers, and I think one thing that's so important when you're entering a job search is really doing this kind of self assessment to identify what you're necessarily looking for. And it
right,
goes beyond salary. Salary is absolutely important, but there's also, information that your people should be looking for around benefits, around work environment, even around managers, and identifying what type of environment you really thrive in. And so when we think about what information is really helpful to see within a job description, you're really kind of putting yourself in the role of this candidate and what do they need to see. I love that there's such, I think, a movement around salary transparency
right.
because, it really is crucial. And I think it's crucial for both the job seeker and the employer
Agreed.
because you need to know from, the candidate's perspective whether or not this job is going to be able to pay you what you need, not just to live,
Right.
but, pay you what it is to be you and to be able to meet your goals. And from the employer's perspective, kind of that would save so much time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you would hate to get to the point interviewing takes a very long time. I know you have a background in recruiting.
Oh,
You
yeah.
absolutely know the not just the cost in terms of time, but in resources. How expensive the recruiting process really is. And so just knowing up front whether or not this is you've got a budget that, is this candidate fits into
Right.
is going to be so helpful. And I think a real understanding of and detail into what are the skills that are needed and what are the role responsibilities, because in an ideal world, the job description is what a job seeker is going to use to determine whether they're a good fit, and they're going to use it to update that resume to
Yeah.
make sure that they're highlighting all of the great skills and experience that they have that meet the employer's needs.
And half the millennials and all of Gen Z grew up with an X in the right-hand corner of their life. So if they're not interested, click, they're out. Like you also got to think as an employer, you've got to think about it being exciting, and like showing them like, hey, there's a passion about this that we have and that you should have. And again, you'll laugh at this. In fact, you'll probably chide me. When I was recruiting, I would talk people out of jobs. Yeah,
Really?
it was kind of like the negative sale. So I'd basically say, "Hey, man, we work too hard. I don't think this is going to be good for you. You're really looking to do this. Maybe work this and start a company. This isn't a good fit for it." Like I would take that tack with every candidate. Like I'm gonna tell them the truth about everything. Like,
Yeah.
listen, here's the deal. We got 80 employees. Probably 60 of them are guys. We're trying to change that. We're doing all kinds of stuff to change that, but like this is a sausage factory. So like if that's not if that's cool, great. If it's not cool, that you just need to know. Like I would give them all the information, all the negative stuff generally, and throw it all out there and basically let them know so that they could make an informed decision. An informed buying decision. It's like I would give them all the negative, which of course recruiters they always get on to me about that because they're like, "You're trying to sell them on the company." I'm like, "No, I want a
But if
relationship with
you're
them."
looking for the right fit,
That's right.
right? And and you're speaking to, I love actually the level of transparency, because, you're touching on, I think some of it is values,
Yeah.
right? In terms
Right.
of what the job seeker is looking for. And a lot of it could be attributes as well.
Right.
If you're working for a startup where you're looking for a candidate that can really wear multiple hats because the team is so small,
Right.
that is such good information to have, because if somebody is looking to really focus and specialize just in one thing, then it may not be that job fit. And, while it's great to make a hire, you want to make a good hire,
You want them to
right?
stay. You want to stay and add value.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned something
Absolutely.
that actually I would do the bit is, especially with startups, I would go into that really hard and go, here's the deal. If you're a person that likes structure, like no judgment. When I taught at the University of Arizona, I taught American Indian Studies 100. So it's kind of a basic level, core level class, and I didn't have a syllabus. And what I learned about not having a syllabus is half the students wanted a syllabus. So half the students after the first class would come to me and go, Professor Tincup, not a professor, and where's the syllabus? I'm like, yeah, there's no syllabus. We're just gonna have class. We're gonna discuss things, and I'm gonna take you through these different topics, and we're just gonna talk about it. I said, I'll give you some articles and things like that, but there's no tests, there's no quizzes. It's all participation. Literally, half the students would their heads would explode because they're so used to.
Breaking their way of thinking, right?
Right.
It's breaking their way of, they've got this idea in their mind around, the way courses are
That's
structured.
right. That's right.
When in reality, they may only look at the syllabus the first week and
Oh,
then never look
100%.
at it
Oh,
again.
but it's having that piece of paper or having the digital document of having that
Yeah,
language. I know when the quiz is. I know when the midterm is. I know
right.
when the final. I'm like, yeah, there is no
I
test.
know when I need to start coming back to class.
Exactly, 100%. And I told him I would tell him. So I learned this because my chair called me into his office after the first kind of semester that I was teaching. He's like, "Hey, tell me about your class. How's everything going?" I'm like, "Man, it's awesome, man. These kids. I mean, I'm not that much older than them, so I don't. I'm a little bit older and I'm married, but like other than that, like there's references that I can make." And he goes, "Yeah, well, tell me about like what's your syllabus look like?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't have a syllabus." He's like, "Huh." He's like, what are your midterm and papers and tests? I'm like, yeah, we don't do any of that. I said, it's just, I want the kids, I called them kids, which is probably not right, but I said, I just want them to come together and let's talk about this. Like, it's history. It's got to be fun. They've got to be engaged. They want to learn stuff. And if they don't, that's cool. Like, I don't, no judgment, but they got to want to participate. And he's like, yeah, here's what I'm going to need you to do. I'm going to need you to build a yeah. I might need you to build a syllabus, and I'm gonna need some tests and some quizzes and some midterms and papers and stuff like that. I'm like, ah.
Like,
And I,
I don't
and
want to, I'll do it.
I didn't, but what I learned in all of that is half the students loved it. They're like,
Mhm.
you're telling me I can just come to class. I just have to show up and interact with people. I'm like, yeah, done. Like, check. I just got an A in that class. And then the half of them are just, their heads would explode. And I think job seekers are similar in the fact that if you're uncomfortable having every day is different, let's say like literally every day you come in or you start your day wherever you are and it's just like it's wheels off. It's like, okay, you're going to work with product. Now you got to go work with customers. Then all of a sudden, now I've got to talk to salespeople. Like it's just, and every day is chaos. Or are you the person that likes structure? You
Yeah,
like having that job, and yeah, it'll nominally change, but really it's kind of structure. I think that's important for employers to convey to job seekers so that they understand what they're getting themselves into.
absolutely. I mean, it helps them manage expectations, right?
Right.
Because it's not to say
That's it.
that, if you're accepting a role where, let's say you do have to wear multiple hats, but you want it to be more focused, what that lets the person do is kind of coming in knowing what they have to do for themselves, right?
Right.
Maybe they have to kind of designate times where they're just going to focus on particular tasks, right?
That's
That's how they're
perfect.
going to be able to manage their work. Or, we talk about managers and the importance of like leadership. If you get an indication in the interview that maybe the manager has a different, maybe
Hmm.
they're more of like a laissez faire leader, right? They're more hands off, but you like somebody who coaches more. It's not to say you couldn't work well with that type of leader, but what it does is it helps you manage your expectation and know I'm going to need to ask for things.
Right.
I'm going to need to
Right.
let this manager know that I do like structured one on ones, or I do want to have professional development conversations because maybe they wouldn't naturally have them on their own. But that's okay. That doesn't mean that you can't be successful in this role or successful working with this person. But it puts some onus back on the
That's right.
candidate to know this is what I'm going to need to be successful. So,
I,
yeah, that information is so important.
I love that. Because again, like there's a fine line between micromanagement and coaching, and not to say that either is good or bad. The point is does the respondent, in this case, this would be an employee, is that how they like things? Like
Hmm.
I've worked with people where they're like, just give me tasks. Like I'm a task killer. Just tell me, give me a list. I'll come in every day. Just give me a list, and I'm just gonna kill the list. I'm like, okay, well I can do that. And I've had people that are more, hey, Will, we haven't talked in like 3 weeks. Can you like give me some advice, some feedback? I'm like, oh, I was waiting for you to kind of like see if that's what you wanted. And it's that understanding of the employee. And again, this can all be conveyed in a job description. This can all be
Absolutely.
conveyed on a careers page and all that stuff. Like all this stuff can be conveyed to your employer brand. Like this is how we, like you said, values earlier. These are our values. This is how we'll make sure you thrive.
And I think, and I believe job seekers appreciate that transparency, right? Give them
Hun-
the information and let them make their decisions based on it.
100%.
Yeah.
So, okay, two questions last. One is was there any job on the list that shocked you?
Any job on the list that particularly shocked me, um, you know, when I look at it again, I do see a lot of specializations. I think
Right.
I know I said I love that veterinarian was on the
Yeah,
list.
yeah, that probably shocked you.
A civil engineer as well. I mentioned to you that I work on Indeed's YouTube channel and we
Yeah.
create these video resources. we have one particular series called A Day in the Life where we feature real people and really show what from start to finish,
I
what are they
love
doing
that.
within a day? And one of our more recent episodes was with a civil engineer, and he actually works for the Sacramento Municipal Utilities
Right.
District. And that was, I think, one of a recent video where I watched it and I thought, do I want to be a civil engineer?
I think I want to do
I
this.
want to be a
I've
civil
always wanted to work
engineer.
with concrete. Yeah, I'm down.
Well, and it's so interesting because this particular role is very technical.
Yeah.
He's working on city planning,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's very creative in a sense too when you're looking at, the software that's used to develop these plans.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, you.
So it's
I.
interesting
I.
role.
This is 100 years ago, but we would do a day in the life for candidates, and we'd
Oh,
pay them.
okay.
So we'd pay them to come in. So we'd give them money, pay for their lunch, their transport, whatever they had going on. But we'd say when we got to that final, I'm like, you need to come behind the veil before you quit your job, before you do something else different. You need to just come behind and see how we work, to
Yeah.
see if that's how you like to work, or if you can help us improve how we do it, etc. But I think we had at that time we probably had about a 50% hit rate where people would come in and they wouldn't work. There's more observational than anything else. They'd go to meetings, they'd be on calls, they'd see whatever everybody was doing. Half of them would say, "I'm down. I can start on Monday, or I'll put in my notice on Monday, whatever the deal is." And half of them would be like, "You know what? I loved everything, but I don't think I don't think this is for me." And it's like, cool.
What a
That's
gift that type of opportunity is.
yeah,
It really is. When I worked in recruiting, one of my first recruiting roles was actually for a grocery store, and it was a large grocery. It was
yeah.
part of a chain, and we
Not
had to
called Whole
maintain
Foods. Got it.
not
Yep.
called Whole Foods, but we had to maintain a staff of over 500 employees just for the store, one store,
Oh
and so
wow.
it was a lot of turnover, very high volume.
Oh yeah.
And at the time, which was many years ago, we talked about the cost of, hiring one person. And that cost, of course, is like the time and the resources and background checks and kind of all of that. And it was something like, $5,000, which does not sound like a lot. But if it
Oh
turns out that that person, is going to not be successful and realize within a month that this isn't the right, maybe they don't want to be, an overnight stalker, maybe it really doesn't fit into their needs. Having that type of insight and knowing what it really takes
hmm
would be so valuable because, again, it saves the company time, it saves the candidate time,
Oh
and
everything.
it really allows you to see, who has the attributes in addition to the skills
Right.
and experience needed to be successful in what you're hiring for.
Grocery and retail. It's either in your blood or it's not. I worked in both, but I worked in food service as well, and I didn't like food service as much. Restaurants and stuff like that. But like retail, I loved retail. Like I loved it. I woke up to do retail because I loved it so much. And it started
Yeah.
in grocery. It started actually in grocery, and then it moved over to retail. And I still think that way. That if you get excited about it, you love it, you can have a great career.
Well, and I actually speak really highly of it too, because that was essentially my first career, even
Yeah,
within, it's where I gained my recruiting experience. I started, 18 years old as like
yeah,
a grocery bagger, then
me
moved
too.
into cashiering. Then as I was going to school, got into recruiting and became like internal HR and talent acquisition. And, it's those types of environments are so great because you can learn so
Oh
many
my,
things.
yeah.
There are so many different parts of the business. And, in my experience, they love to promote internally
Oh
because you
yeah,
have that institutional knowledge.
that's right.
So, when I talk to people who, are saying, oh, I'm considering getting out of retail, maybe I'll do this,
Mm,
it's like, absolutely, we can look at, switching industries. But if you like the industry and if you
yeah,
like where you are, you've got a great set of institutional knowledge. I
100%.
bet we can identify, those like management programs or, roles within the corporate office if you want to get out of the store setting. So much opportunity for growth that may not necessarily require you to find a whole new company to work for.
That's right. Okay, last question. I want you to put your futurist hat on. The next time we do this research, what do you think will be on the top of the list?
I think we're going to continue to see healthcare roles
Yeah,
being very
yeah,
prominent. I can see that staying. I think the roles like physician and registered nurse are going to be there. We did some additional research for another top jobs list, and again, more specialized roles like behavior analyst were on
right.
there. So again, I think we're going to see a lot of these, what we would consider to be traditional roles, but with that emphasis in specialization, because people have individual needs, and so what we're seeing is these roles and these needs really adapting to kind of what society needs. So I anticipate we'll see more specialization in healthcare.
Mike walks off stage, but before you do, YouTube channel again?
Yes, please go to Indeed's YouTube channel. Please give a listen to Job Search Stories. It's our video podcast. We're also on Spotify and Apple. And of course, William would love to have you on.
100%. 100%.
I'm gonna put you on the
Thanks.
spot.
No, no, I'm good. Thanks to the audience for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.